views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Russell. Welcome to the Healing Light Podcast. I am a psychic intuitive who's been reading tarot cards for over 25 years. I'm also Reiki certified. Join me as I read cards, share intuitive messages, promote healing, and much, much more. Hello, everyone. This is Caitlin Greenglass from the Healing Light Podcast. Before I get to my special guest, Brian Black, I wanted to remind everyone that the Healing Light Podcast is every first and third Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you very much for following and listening. I always welcome feedback. If you have a show idea, if there's someone you'd like me to interview, or if you want to be a guest on my podcast, please feel free to reach out by private message on any of my social media platforms. Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all easy. The Healing Light NH. Again, that's The Healing Light NH. Or you can send me an email at thehealinglight1. That's the healing light number 1 at gmail.com. So this is very new for me, and I was very curious when Brian was talking about what he does. So I can't wait to dive into it. So Brian Black is from Positive Music. It's a positive music advocate and host of Anything Posi. He's also a podcaster as well. So welcome, Brian, to the Healing Light Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I guess you could say on a spiritual journey and finding joy and enrichment in that process. One of the things that I just find fascinating to no end, and I know this will be cliche for life-changing things, but music, and in particular, there is an area of thought in spirituality called New Thought, which is essentially choosing new thoughts to be happier, choosing new beliefs, choosing new actions to go with those new thoughts and new beliefs to ultimately change the world, to at the most immediate level, to be happier and more engaged in the world. But it's a journey that I've just found incredibly life-changing and incredibly fascinating. Music is it's an essential part of the New Thought establishment, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. However, where I come into this is that much of what gets considered New Thought is the music and the culture is very, I want to say this politely and possibly as diplomatically as possible. But much of the music and much of the culture associated with New Thought is still very much in the purview of baby boomers and seniors.
Hmm.
And accordingly, what that means is that if there's a Generation Xer, like myself, for example, if there's a
Mhm.
millennial, if
Me
there's
too. I'm a Gen
yeah,
Xer.
exactly. So what that means is someone who is going to a New Thought community, whether it's, and the major ones are Center for Spiritual Living, which is religious science or science of mind, which is based on a book by Ernest Holmes called The Science of Mind. There's also Unity, which is based on the writings of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. These are basically the schools of thought that originated in the early 1900s. You'll often hear people describe them as ancient wisdom, timeless wisdom, phrases like that, which is technically true, but New Thought as we know it in contemporary usage really dates back to the early 1900s. That's
Wow.
when Ernest Holmes was alive. That's when Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were alive. That's when the roots of what we now know as New Thought originated. So that's the context for what I'm talking about. The music piece of that is something that I believe needs to be more diverse. It needs to be more inclusive. It needs to be not just adult contemporary music. And there is a prevailing sentiment that if someone's on a spiritual path, if someone's meditating, if they're mindfulness, meditation, any number of gratitude, any number of different spiritual practices, there is often a pervasive and I would say erroneous belief that someone on a spiritual journey is somehow under an obligation to forfeit what brings them joy. In other words, if they happen to enjoy punk music or heavy metal or might like horror movies or just as an example, then those choices for media are perceived as being negative and antithetical to the person's growth. And to a certain extent, if someone is passive in that, is exercising a lot of laziness and not taking, not being, an active participant in that process, then it certainly is true that it's an easy way to get negative, because obviously there's a lot of negativity in the world, and why would someone want to knowingly be a source of that and promulgate more negativity? So the rationale is very sound, no pun intended. But that's something that if there's, for example, music that someone, the whole with movies, we have movies that get called feel-good movies, right? I mean, there's movies that if you're, if you're not feeling well, you just, watch a certain movie that's the feel-good movie and you feel better. And yet there seems to be, not the same level of respectability when it comes to music. Who's to say that someone having a rough day, someone who's been through a traumatic experience, someone who's still in healing, who's to say for that person, oh no, you can't find that song to be uplifting, you can't find that song to be healing, you can't find that song to be a feel-good song to you. And so my interest in New Thought and my interest in positive music is just to let people know at some point in time, it's inevitable that you will come across, very well-meaning people who mean well, who will at a certain point make you wrong and make you feel as though your spiritual journey and what you have to bring to the table is not as valid because of what you choose to listen to, what so that's my
Hmm.
uh, mission in life, I guess you could say, is to let
Oh,
people know that you're perfect and whole just as you are.
good.
If and that's, I think, does not get um, it does not, that messaging is not as common as it should be.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that I have you as a guest because I just feel like what you just said about music and healing. I had blood work today, and blood work is blood work. You go in, they stick a needle in your arm, out you go. You really don't have, you don't really have an interaction. However, um, the young gentleman who was taking my blood had this very peaceful Zen-like music on.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, it smells. Oh my goodness, it sounds very peaceful and zen in here." He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, I've tuned it out." He goes, "It's good for my patients because if they're nervous or upset, it tends to calm them down." He said, "I used to have nature sounds." He said, "But it made me want to leave and go back home." I guess he
Mhm.
lives out in the woods. So, but he said, "But really, what I like is black metal or death metal." And I said, "Wow, I think I've heard of death metal, but I've never heard of black metal." So he said, "Yeah, when I'm out," and I forget what he said about what he does outside. He says, "I play that." And he said, "Did you know that it has been shown that black metal has the same composition style as classical music?" And I said, "No, I did not know that." Now, I have not ever liked what I call heavy metal music with people. I feel like sometimes they're not singing; they're more like screaming. But I thought it was interesting what he said about how it's like a calming uh, for him. And you're exactly right. Who am I to judge that if I don't like black metal music, and I don't know, I need to listen to it to really see what it's about.
Yeah.
Because who knows, maybe I will like it. But who am I to say that's wrong? Now, I know for myself being in therapy, and we talk about the thought process and changing your thoughts, one of the things that and correct me if I'm wrong, is that sometimes I do this negative self-talk, and a lot of people do that. "Oh, why'd you make that mistake? You're so stupid. You're never going to get it, whatever." It's, well, I'm a trauma survivor. So a lot of it goes back to that. However, you change the thought to, you know, I, what is it in reality
Mhm.
that you're dealing with now? And replace that thought with a positive thought. And now I've been doing that. It works a lot better. And then with music, for me, every so often, I have a YouTube or my playlists on Amazon, and and I have a whole variety of music that I listen to. I mean, it just ranges from R&B soul to some modern pop to 80s and nothing really classical or opera, but
Mhm.
I never liked that. But and I don't even have to always put on the whole song. I get so excited about each song that I'll play a little bit from each and move on. When I'm feeling like I need to have that one time and some serious thought is when I listen to Tori Amos's album Little Earthquakes,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
I can
yeah.
listen to that. There is not one bad song on it. They're all great songs, and I can relate to all of them. So it sounds like that I don't think people realize that you're absolutely right. If you are not changing your thoughts and you're negative, you're not participating really in your own healing, and you're not participating in the healing of the world. You can absolutely do that. Like I said, you can, if it sounds right to you, and that music is a big part of healing, and music is huge. And I don't know what we would do if we didn't have music in our lives. So
Exactly.
would you
Exactly.
agree, Brian?
I would, and I should probably clarify that, those well-meaning and sincere spiritual people who are adamant that, any, fill in the blank music is negative and harmful. If someone's being passive and lazy in the process, then in many cases it will be. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's because what someone will find healing, what someone will find uplifting, what someone will find inspiring, that is a very personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
the reason that New Thought and other areas of spirituality as well, but mostly New Thought, the reason that the music and culture seems to be oriented one way is because from a demographics perspective, and I don't say this to be mean or pointing fingers, but the majority, and I do say majority, and meaning just that, majority of the people who attend are, for the most part, financially wealthy. And I emphasize financial wealthy because obviously wealth comes in all shapes and forms, and you can be wealthy without, so I just emphasize that financial part. But are financially wealthy, well-to-do white people, basically older, financially wealthy white people. And you say, well, yeah, but that demographic though is typically going to be coming more from a place of privilege, less of a place of having obstacles in your life, healing journeys, so to speak.
Right.
And I can't generalize, and I'm not going to generalize here, but just someone who's old enough to be your grandma, are they going to have the same life experience as you do? Probably not.
No.
And yeah, so that right there, and it's almost, the proverbial generation gap, which, and not to pick on New Thought, because this is something that's probably standard with all, spiritual, organized religion in general, to a certain extent, will have that generation gap. But the reason it's more pronounced in a lot of New Thought environments is because New Thought is the area of thought and philosophy that prides itself on being, oh, we're not gonna be your grandma's church. We know when we affirm that you're perfect and whole just as you are. We're going to affirm that you don't need to worry about going to hell. Nothing you've done is a sin. So they've got all the right messaging that everyone, I would think, needs to know. And obviously, this would not pertain to those who are happy with their church home. Obviously, if someone's
right.
happy, at their Catholic church, if someone's happy at their evangelical church, and obviously that would be stupid for them to leave, a church where you're happy at. So this is obviously not pertaining to those who are happy where they're at, spiritually or religiously. But for those who have that feeling of restlessness, like, okay, where are the other people who, are believing what I believe? Where are my peeps? And someone who is not prepared for it, it can be a very isolating and a very lonely place, because everyone around you, you don't see anyone around you who looks like you. And I think it's interesting that New Thought, many authors and ministers and different communities have just recently, fairly recently, probably in the last 1 to 2 years, have finally, and I do mean finally, taken a look at, okay, well, what can we do to be more inclusive? What can we do to be more diverse? And I would submit that music is a big part of that, because you think about it, there's many Generation Xers, millennials, people younger than us. Music is a major source of spiritual uplift for many people. It's a major source of healing. It's a major source of personal work, shadow work, any number of different spiritual practices. And the notion that it's always going to be a church building with a minister giving a message that you have to sit there for an hour or more and listen. I think that era and those days of that being the norm, I think that's drawing to a close.
Absolutely.
So you're right. The music part of it, and for you it's Toriamos, and Toriamos is great. That's it's So everything you said, it's absolutely on point.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, that there's a lot of therapy programs. There's therapy programs for kids with music and with seniors or those with Alzheimer's. And there's even therapies with music with animals as well. So music does have a healing quality. You're absolutely right. Interesting point that you make, and I would not have thought of that it's in part of that being included. Because I know too that, yeah, a lot of us in the Gen X age, we all had those songs and bands and memories because we're all feral,
Yeah.
You don't come in, don't come in, get your butt out. I remember my mother like, get out of the house on a Saturday. It's summer, go play, and don't come home until the street lights come on.
Yeah.
So we sought sanctuary in our music as well, and there's just different aspects of it. So like you're right, you can certainly worship in your church, your temple, whatever, and you can listen to spiritual songs and the chorus and the choir and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you want to allow people to be diverse and include them.
Exactly,
And not
because
shun them, right.
because we're talking about spirituality, and that's a word that is still a scary word to a lot of people. You've got church trauma, you've got any number of different not so good, really not nice experiences that people have with that word. And I know that there's often an attempt to not quite redefine it, but maybe flatter up a bit and just say spiritual, not religious. And the fact of the matter is, though, what we're talking about is simply connecting to source, connecting to what brings you joy. And I think just remembering that is something that helps cut through a lot of the flowery language that will often scare people away and will give them just a sour taste in their mouth. Because if you're presenting it as something that it's not going to be for people, why not just say what it is you're talking about? And what we're talking about is connecting to what brings you joy, connecting to what is your authenticity, your majesty in the universe.
I'm finding that too. As I get older, I'm 55. I would say I'm closer to 60 than I am 50 now because I'm going to be. But you just need to find your joy in life. I mean, I would say that that's ageless, really. I would say that Gen Zers, millennials, Well, I think even, young kids nowadays, the Gen Z,
Mhm.
I know people give them a lot of flack because, they grew up in, with phones and, devices and all that. But, they also have it pretty rough, if you think
Mhm.
about it. There's a lot of pressure. There's cyberbullying they have to contend with, and it's relentless. It can be, there's school shooter drills, and there's messages and social media and a pressure to get likes and shares. And so my heart goes out to a lot of them who are struggling, and a lot of them can be anxious and worried, and I definitely, think that I just want to say to them, just like you said, it just, what you just said makes me want to say to them and my other folks that I do readings for and do Reiki on, find your joy, music, art, the arts, find your joy, and then everything can fall into place from there. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I think the younger generations are also more socially minded, more,
yes, they
have a
are.
greater awareness, because that is one of the criticisms that New Thought still gets, is that it is, and again, I'm relaying the criticism. So this is not me saying it, but the criticism of it,
Right.
and I sometimes agree, sometimes not, but the criticism that it often gets is, oh, New Thought is all about, self-centeredness, about, there was that whole thing with The Secret a few years ago, where it was all about, oh, manifesting, a cup of coffee, and then move on to manifesting a Porsche and a big McMansion.
Hmm.
And I would imagine when people hear that and they just think, okay, well, that's that's what you're gonna manifest. You've got all this stuff in the world, people crying out for help, people crying out for love, and that's what you're gonna manifest. Just stuff for yourself, more toys, more goodies for yourself,
Right.
and you've got, your fellow brothers and sisters, that nothing's being manifested for them.
Right.
Hello. So I think that's a criticism that New Thought will probably continue to get for a long time, until, until it's not so much of a stereotype.
Yeah. Right. And I've read The Secret, and I was guilty of it, about trying to
Mhm.
manifest, some material things in my life. But then when I was tuned to, in Reiki 1, 2, and a Reiki master,
Mhm.
now Reiki master teacher, what Reiki tells you is, yes, you're manifesting, but it needs to be, um, how do I explain this? More than just things, or, you know, you could say, really, manifest joy. You could manifest peace in your house, your health, and a lot of things will come from that.
Mhm.
So I, with Reiki, when you become a Reiki 2 and a Reiki master, you're allowed to send Reiki into the universe or your higher power, whatever you might call it. And then you can, put those thoughts in, change your thoughts and put those into action. So, and what I've also done is I not only do Reiki for myself every day, but I do Reiki for my wife. I've done it for my
Mhm.
animals. I've done it for Israel. I've done it for lots of things. So,
Well, one of the things that, and I am familiar with Reiki, one of the things that I like about Reiki is that what you'll often hear, and obviously I don't really agree with this, is in many spiritual circles, whether spiritual, not religious, or New Thought, or whatever, whatever
Mm-hmm.
flavor of spiritual, not religious, you'll often hear the notion that, turn off the news. The news is always going to be negative, which,
Right.
and that's, I would imagine that can be true to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I had, it was either the first or second time I had taken a Reiki class, and the teacher said she does watch the news, specifically so she knows where to send the Reiki to. Because
Okay,
if
yeah.
you've got people who are,
Uh-huh.
who are hurting, who are, who need the love, then how do you know if you're not watching and you don't know they're there, how do you know where to send it? So
Exactly.
that always stuck with me when I heard that.
That is amazing. All right, so we've got this is a really fascinating conversation. I feel like we could talk about this
Oh
for
yeah, yes.
hours. But I need to wrap it up. But you've really given you've opened my mind up to the possibilities, and I feel like based on what you said that I'm on the right path.
Mhm.
I'm always a work in progress, so but yeah, I think this resonates with a lot of people, especially in this day and age. So um thank you very much for your insight. So I
Oh,
wanted to say, oh, go ahead.
thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. Absolutely. So I want to thank Brian Black. Again, this is Caitlin with the Healing Light Podcast. Reach out to me at the Healing Light NH on all social media. So, Brian, if someone wanted to contact you or listen or download an episode or all of them for your podcast, how do they reach you and how do they find you?
I'm on actually, I should say all of the socials at this point. So Instagram, any Posy, I think it's any dot Posy. The Mixcloud page is Mixcloud / anything _ anything. So those are probably the two best ways to find the show and to reach me.
Oh, excellent. So I will do that tonight to find you. So thank you very much. Everybody listen to Brian's podcast and really think about what he had to say tonight. Find your joy, change your thought, enjoy your music, and just try to be I think, the best self you can be. So thank you very much, Brian, and you have a
Thank you.
good night. Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.